by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Salem, my hometown, is a quiet place, and not many ships call at the port here, though in the last century, before the war with Britain, the port was often busy. Now the ships go down the coast to the great seaports of Boston or New York, and grass grows in the streets around the old port buildings in Salem. For a few years, when I was a young man, I worked in the port offices of Salem. Most of the time, there was very little work to do, and one day in 1849, I was looking through an old wooden box in one of the dusty, unused rooms of the building. It was full of papers about long-forgotten ships, but then something red caught my eye. I took it out and saw that it was a piece of red material in the shape of a letter about 10 centimeters long. It was the capital letter A. It was a wonderful piece of needlework, with patterns of gold thread around the letter, but the material was now worn thin with age. It was a strange thing to find. What could it mean? Was it once part of some fashionable lady's dress long years ago? Perhaps a mark to show that the wearer was a famous person, or someone of good family or great importance. I held it in my hands, wondering, and it seemed to me that the scarlet letter had some deep meaning which I could not understand. Then I held the letter to my chest and, you must not doubt my words, experienced a strange feeling of burning heat. Suddenly the letter seemed to be not red material, but red-hot metal. I trembled and let the letter fall upon the floor. Then I saw that there was an old packet of papers next to its place in the box. I opened the packet carefully and began to read. There were several papers explaining the history of the scarlet letter and containing many details of the life and experiences of a woman called Hester Prynne. She had died long ago, sometime in the 1690s, but many people in the state of Massachusetts at that time had known her name and story. And it is Hester Prynne's story that I will tell you now. It is a story of the early years of Boston, soon after the city fathers had built with their own hands the first wooden buildings, the houses, the churches, and the prison. Chapter 1. Hester Prynne's Shame. On that June morning, in the middle years of the 17th century, the prison in Boston was still a new building. But it already looked old and was a dark, ugly place, surrounded by rough grass. The only thing of beauty was a wild rose growing by the door, and its bright, sweet-smelling flowers seemed to smile kindly at the poor prisoners who went into that place, and at those who came out to their death. A crowd of people waited in Prison Lane. The men all had beards and wore sad-colored clothes and tall gray hats. There were women, too, in the crowd, and all eyes watched the heavy wooden door of the prison. There was no mercy in the faces, and the women seemed to take a special interest in what was going to happen. They were country women, and the bright morning sun shone down on strong shoulders and wide skirts, and on round, red faces. Many of them had been born in England, and had crossed the sea 20 years before, with the first families who came to build the town of Boston in New England. They brought the customs and religion of Old England with them, and also the loud voices and strong opinions of Englishwomen of those times. "It would be better," said one hard-faced woman of 50. "If we good, sensible, church-going women could judge this Hester Prynne, and would we give her the same light punishment that the magistrates give her? No." "People say," said another woman, "that Mr. Dimsdale, her priest, is deeply saddened by the shame that this woman has brought on his church." "The magistrates are too merciful," said a third woman. "They should burn the letter into her forehead with hot metal, not put it on the front of her dress." "She ought to die," cried another woman. "She has brought shame on all of us. Ah, here she comes." The door of the prison opened, and, like a black shadow coming out into sunshine, the prison officer appeared. He put his right hand on the shoulder of a woman and pulled her forward, but she pushed him away and stepped out into the open air. There was a child in her arms, a baby of 3 months, which shut its eyes and turned its head away from the bright sun. The woman's face was suddenly pink under the stares of the crowd, but she smiled proudly and looked round at her neighbors and the people of her town. On the bosom of her dress, in fine red cloth, and surrounded with fantastic patterns of gold thread, was the letter A. The young woman was tall and perfectly shaped. She had long dark hair which shone in the sunlight, and a beautiful face with deep black eyes. She walked like a lady, and those who had expected her to appear sad and ashamed were surprised how her beauty shone out through her misfortune. But the thing that everyone stared at was the scarlet letter, sewn so fantastically onto her dress. "She is clever with her needle," said one of the women. "But what a way to show it! She is meant to wear that letter as a punishment, not as something to be proud of." The officer stepped forward, and people moved back to allow the woman to walk through the crowd. It was not far from the prison to the marketplace, where, at the western end, in front of Boston's earliest church, stood the scaffold. Here criminals met their death before the eyes of the townspeople, but the scaffold platform was also used as a place of shame, where those who had done wrong in the eyes of God were made to stand and show their shameful faces to the world. Hester Prynne accepted her punishment bravely. She walked up the wooden steps to the platform and turned to face the stares of the crowd. 1,000 eyes fixed on her, looking at the scarlet letter on her bosom. People today might laugh at a sight like this, but in those early years of New England, religious feeling was very strong, and the shame of Hester Prynne's sin was felt deeply by young and old throughout the town. As she stood there, feeling every eye upon her, she felt she wanted to scream and throw herself off the platform, or else go mad at once. Pictures from the past came and went inside her head. Pictures of her village in Old England, of her dead parents, her father's face with his white beard, her mother's look of worried love, and her own face, a girl's face in the dark mirror where she had often stared at it. And then the face of a man old in years, a thin, white face with the serious look of one who spends most of his time studying books. A man whose eyes seemed to see into the human soul when their owner wished it, and whose left shoulder was a little higher than his right. Next came pictures of the tall gray houses and great churches of the city of Amsterdam, where a new life had begun for her with this older man. And then, suddenly, she was back in the Boston marketplace, standing on the platform of the scaffold. Could it be true? She held the child so close to her bosom that it cried out. She looked down at the scarlet letter, touched it with her finger to be sure that the child and the shame were real. Yes, these things were real. Everything else had disappeared. After a time, the woman noticed two figures on the edge of the crowd. An Indian was standing there, and by his side was a white man, small and intelligent-looking, and wearing clothes that showed he had been traveling in wild places. And although he had arranged his clothes to hide it, it was clear to Hester Prynne that one of the man's shoulders was higher than the other. Again she pulled the child to her bosom so violently that it cried out in pain, but the mother did not seem to hear it. The man on the edge of the crowd had been looking closely at Hester Prynne for some time before she saw him. At first his face had become dark and angry, but only for a moment. Then it was calm again. Soon he saw Hester staring, and knew that she recognized him. "Excuse me," he said to a man near him. "Who is this woman, and why is she standing there in public shame?" "You must be a stranger here, friend," said the man, looking at the questioner and his Indian companion, "or you would know about the evil Mistress Prynne. She has brought great shame on Mr. Dimmesdale's church." "It is true," said the stranger. "I am new here. I have had many accidents on land and at sea, and I've been a prisoner of the wild men in the south. This Indian has helped me get free. Please tell me what brought this Hester Prynne to the scaffold." "She was the wife of an Englishman who lived in Amsterdam," said the townsman. "He decided to come to Massachusetts and sent his wife ahead of him, as he had business matters to bring to an end before he could leave. During the 2 years that the woman has lived here in Boston, there has been no news of Master Prynne, and his young wife, you see—" "Ah, I understand," said the stranger, with a cold smile. "And who is the father of the child she is holding?" "That remains a mystery," said the other man. "Hester Prynne refuses to speak his name." "Her husband should come and find the man," said the stranger, with another smile. "Yes, indeed he should, if he is still alive," replied the townsman. "Our magistrates, you see, decided to be merciful. She is obviously guilty of adultery, and the usual punishment for adultery is death. But Mistress Prynne is young and good-looking, and her husband is probably at the bottom of the sea. So, in their mercy, the magistrates have ordered her to stand on the scaffold for 3 hours, and to wear the scarlet A for adultery for the rest of her life." "A sensible punishment," said the stranger. "It will warn others against this sin. However, it is wrong that the father of her child, who has also sinned, is not standing by her side on the scaffold. But he will be known. He will be known." The stranger thanked the townsman, whispered a few words to his Indian companion, and then they both moved away through the crowd. During this conversation, Hester Prynne had been watching the stranger, and was glad to have the staring crowd between herself and him. It was better to stand like this than to have to meet him alone, and she feared the moment of that meeting greatly. Lost in these thoughts, she did not at first hear the voice behind her. "Listen to me, Hester Prynne," the voice said again. It was the voice of the famous John Wilson, the oldest priest in Boston, and a kind man. He stood with the other priests and officers of the town on a balcony outside the meeting house, which was close behind the scaffold. "I have asked my young friend." Mr. Wilson put a hand on the shoulder of the pale young priest beside him, "to ask you once again for the name of the man who brought this terrible shame upon you. Mr. Dimmesdale has been your priest, and is the best man to do it. Speak to the woman, Mr. Dimmesdale. It is important to her soul, and to you, who cares about her soul. Persuade her to tell the truth." The young priest had large, sad brown eyes, and lips that trembled as he spoke. He seemed shy and sensitive, and his face had a fearful, half-frightened look. But when he spoke, his simple words and sweet voice went straight to people's hearts, and often brought tears to their eyes. He stepped forward on the balcony and looked down at the woman below him. "Hester Prynne," he said, "if you think it will bring peace to your soul, and will bring you closer to the path to heaven, speak out the name of the man. Do not be silent because you feel sorry for him. Believe me, Hester, although he may have to step down from a high place and stand beside you on the platform of shame, it is better to do that than to hide a guilty heart through his life. Heaven has allowed you public shame and the chance to win an open battle with the evil inside you and the sadness outside. Do you refuse to give him that same chance, which he may be too afraid to take himself?" Hester shook her head, her face now as pale as the young priest's. "I will not speak his name," she said. "My child must find a father in heaven. She will never know one on earth." Again she was asked, and again she refused. Then the oldest priest spoke to the crowd about all the evil in the world, and about the sin that brought the mark of the scarlet letter. For an hour or more he spoke, but Hester Prynne kept her place alone upon the platform of shame. When the hours of punishment were over, she was taken back to the prison, and it was whispered by those who stared after her that the scarlet letter threw a terrible, ghostly light into the darkness inside the prison doors. Chapter 2. Roger Chillingworth's Secret. Back inside the prison, Hester Prynne became strangely fearful and excited. The prison officer, Master Brackett, watched her carefully, afraid that she would do something violent, either to herself or to the child. By night-time, unable to quieten her, and worried about the child who screamed without stopping, Brackett decided to bring a doctor to her. He described him to Hester as someone who had learned much about natural medicines from the Indians. But the man who followed Brackett into the prison was the man Hester had seen on the edge of the crowd earlier, the man she had watched in fear. His name, she was told, was Roger Chillingworth. Brackett brought the man in and stood watching in surprise as Hester became as still as death. The child, however, continued to cry. "Please leave us alone," Chillingworth said to the prison officer, "and you will soon have peace in your house." He had entered the room calmly, carrying a small bag, and he remained calm after Brackett had left them. First he went to the child and looked carefully at her. Then he opened his bag, took out some powder, and put it into a cup of water. "Here, woman," he said. "The child is yours, not mine. Give this to her." Hester did not move, and when she spoke, her voice was a whisper. "Don't take your revenge on an innocent child." "Silly woman," he replied, half coldly, half kindly. "If this poor, miserable baby was my own, mine as well as yours, I would give her the same medicine." Hester still hesitated, so he took the child and gave her the medicine himself. Almost at once she became quiet, and after a moment fell peacefully asleep. Chillingworth prepared another drink of medicine and held out the cup to Hester. "Drink it," he said. "It cannot quieten your troubled soul, but it will calm you." She took it from him slowly, but her eyes were full of doubt about his reasons for helping her. Then she looked at her sleeping child. "I have thought of death," she said. "I have wished for it, and even prayed for it. But if death is in this cup, then I ask you to think again before I drink it." "You need not be afraid," he replied calmly. "If I wanted revenge, then what more could I ask for than to let you live and suffer under the shadow of this shame?" As he spoke, he put his finger on the scarlet letter, which suddenly seemed to burn red-hot on Hester's bosom. She drank the medicine quickly, then sat down on the bed where the child was sleeping. She watched, trembling as the man she had wronged pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "Hester," he said, "you've been weak, but I've been stupid. Look at me. I'm old and ugly. I was ugly from the moment that I was born. But you were young and beautiful and full of life. How could I have imagined the day that I married you that you would ever love me? How could a man of books and learning be so stupid?" "I never felt or pretended any love for you," said Hester. "True," he replied, "but I hoped to make you love me." "I have greatly wronged you," Hester whispered. "We have wronged each other," he said. "I'm not looking for revenge, Hester. I wish you no harm. But there is a man living who has wronged us both. Who is he?" "Do not ask me," she cried, looking straight at him. "You will never know his name." His smile was both dark and confident. "Believe me, Hester," he said, "I shall know him. Although he does not wear a letter of shame on his clothes as you do, I shall read it on his heart. I shall see it in his eyes. I shall watch him tremble, and I will feel myself tremble with him. But don't be afraid. I won't hurt him or harm his position in the town if he is an important man here. Nor shall I inform the law. No, let him live. Let him pretend to be an honest man. Heaven will punish him for me, but I will know him." "You say you will not harm him," said Hester, confused and afraid, "but your words frighten me." "One thing I ask you, you who were my wife," he said. "You have kept your lover's secret. Now keep mine. Tell nobody that you ever called me husband. No one in this land knows me, but here on this wild edge of the earth I shall stay, because you and yours, Hester Prynne, belong to me. Love or hate, right or wrong, my home is where you are and where he is. But keep my secret." "Why do you want this?" said Hester, suddenly afraid of this secret agreement, although she did not know why. "Why not say openly who you are, and send me away at once?" "Perhaps because I do not want to hear what people say about a husband who loses his wife to another man," he said. "Let them think your husband is already dead. Pretend not to know me. Do not tell our secret to anyone, and most of all, not to your lover. Do not fail in this, Hester. Remember, his good name, his position, his life will be in my hands." "I will keep your secret, as I have kept his," said Hester. "And now, Mistress Prynne," said the man called Roger Chillingworth, "I will leave you alone with your child and the scarlet letter." He smiled slowly. Hester stared at him, afraid of the expression in his eyes. "Why do you smile at me?" she asked. "Have you tied me into an agreement that will destroy my soul?" "Not your soul," he answered, with another smile. "No, not yours." Chapter 3. A Fatherless Child. Hester Prynne's time in prison now came to an end, but she did not move away from the town. The father of her child lived here, and here she would stay, although she kept this thought hidden guiltily in her heart. The reason she gave herself for staying was this: "I sinned here, and I will suffer my earthly punishment here." There was a small cottage just outside the town, looking out across the sea towards the forest-covered hills of the west, and Hester and her child went to live in this lonely little house. They had no friends, but Hester soon found that she could earn enough money to buy food and clothes for herself and her daughter. She was clever with a needle, and the scarlet letter which she wore on her bosom was a perfect example of her work that everyone could see. Soon Hester's beautiful sewing, with its patterns in gold and silver thread, became the fashion with the rich and important people of the town. Her needlework was seen on the shirts of the governor, on the fine dresses of the ladies, on the babies' little coats and hats, and on the burial clothes of the dead. Hester had employment for as many hours as she wanted to work. She used whatever time she had left to make clothes for the poor people of the town, although she got no thanks for it. And indeed, she found no kindness anywhere. The Puritans of that time were hard judges, and a woman who had sinned as Hester had sinned was always an outsider. Every word, every look, every cold, accusing silence reminded her of the shame and the lonely misery of her life. Even the children ran after her in the street, shouting terrible names. She lived very simply. Her own dresses were made from dark, sad-colored cloth, with the scarlet letter bright on the bosom. Her child's clothes were the opposite, in materials of deep, rich colors, with beautiful patterns sewn in gold thread. Her daughter's name was Pearl. She was a pretty child, but a child of many moods. One minute bright and happy and loving, the next minute dark and angry. A child of sin, she had no right to play with the children of godly families, and, like her mother, she was an outsider. In a strange way, Pearl seemed to understand this, and often screamed and threw stones at the other children. Hester worried about her daughter's wildness and tried hard to correct her, but without much success. Sometimes her only hours of peace and quietness were when Pearl was sleeping. One day, when Pearl was about 3 years old, Hester went to the house of Governor Bellingham. She was taking a fine shirt she had sewn, but she also wanted to speak to the governor in person. She had heard that many Puritans in the town wanted to take Pearl away from her. They said it would be better for the child to grow up in a more godly home than Hester Prynne's. So it was a worried Hester who walked to the governor's house that morning. She had dressed her daughter in a beautiful red dress, adding to the child's natural beauty, and as Pearl danced along beside her mother, it had a strange effect. The child, in her red dress, seemed like the scarlet letter in another shape, the scarlet letter given life and movement. At the governor's house, the door was opened by a servant. "Is the governor in?" asked Hester. "Yes," replied the servant, "but there are people with him at the moment. You can't see him now." "I'll wait," said Hester, and stepped into the entrance hall. The hall was wide with a high ceiling, and there were heavy chairs along one side and a long table in the center. At the far end of the hall was a big glass door, which opened out into a garden. Hester could see rose bushes and apple trees, and Pearl immediately began to cry for a red rose. "Shh! Be quiet, child," said her mother. "Look, the governor is coming down the garden path with 3 more gentlemen." Governor Bellingham, with his gray beard, walked in front. Behind him came John Wilson, the old priest, whose beard was as white as snow, and behind him was Arthur Dimmesdale, with Roger Chillingworth. The young priest's health had been poor for some time, and Roger Chillingworth, well known in the town for his knowledge of medicines, was now both friend and doctor to him. The governor pushed open the door and found himself looking at Pearl, while Hester stood in the shadow of a curtain, half hidden. "What have we here?" said Governor Bellingham, surprised to see the little scarlet figure in front of him. "Yes, what little bird is this?" said old Mr. Wilson. "Who are you, child?" "My name is Pearl," answered the little girl. "Pearl?" replied the old priest. "But where is your mother? Ah, I see her now." He turned to the governor and whispered, "This is the child we were talking about. And look, here is the unhappy woman, Hester Prynne, her mother." "Is that right?" cried the governor. "She comes at a good time. We will discuss the matter now." He stepped through the door into the hall, followed by his 3 guests. "Hester Prynne, we have been asking many questions about you recently. Are you the right person to teach this child the ways of God, and so make sure of a place in heaven for her soul? You, a woman who has sinned, will it not be better for her if we take her away from you and teach her the truths of heaven and earth? What can you do for her, woman?" "I can teach my little Pearl what I have learned from this," answered Hester Prynne, putting her finger on the scarlet letter. "Every day it teaches me lessons that I pass on to my child. She will be a better and wiser person than I ever was." Bellingham turned to the old priest. "Mr. Wilson, see what this child knows," he said. The old priest sat down in one of the heavy chairs and tried to bring Pearl across to him, but she escaped through the open door and stood on the step outside, looking like a richly colored bird ready to fly away. "Pearl," said Mr. Wilson, with a serious look on his face, "listen to me, child. Can you tell me who made you?" Now, Pearl knew the answer very well, because Hester had told her about God many times, and had explained those things which every child should know. But Pearl put her fingers in her mouth and would not speak. "You must answer good Mr. Wilson's question," said her mother. "Please, Pearl, tell him what you know." "My mother picked me from the wild rose bush that grows outside the prison door," said Pearl. Roger Chillingworth smiled and whispered something in the young priest's ear. "This is terrible," cried the governor. "The child is 3 years old, and she does not know who made her. I do not think, gentlemen, that we need to ask any more." Hester pulled Pearl towards her and held her hand. "God gave me the child," she cried. "She is my happiness, my pain. You shall not take her. I will die first." "My poor woman," said the old priest kindly, "we will find someone who will take care of the child far better than you can." "God gave her to me," repeated Hester, her voice high and afraid. "I will not let her go." She turned to Mr. Dimsdale. "Speak for me," she cried. "You were my priest, and you know me better than these men. You know what is in my heart, and how strongly a mother feels when she has nothing except her child and the scarlet letter." The young priest stepped forward, his face white and nervous, and with pain in his large, dark eyes. "There is truth in what she says," he began. His voice was sweet and gentle, but it seemed to ring through the hall like a bell. "God gave her the child, and is that not part of God's plan for this poor, sinful woman? With the child by her side, every day she will be reminded of her great sin, her shame, and the pain and sadness of it will always be with her. But God has given her a job to do, which will keep her soul alive and save her from further sin. She must love and care for the child and teach it the ways of God, to know good from evil, right from wrong. And, with God's great mercy, if she brings the child to heaven, then the child also will bring its mother there. No, no, we should leave the mother and child together and let God's gift do its work, saving the mother's soul." "You speak, my friend, with a strange passion," said old Roger Chillingworth, smiling at him. "And my young friend speaks wisely," said Mr. Wilson. "What do you think, Governor? Does he speak well for the poor woman?" "Indeed he does," replied Governor Bellingham. "He argues sensibly, and so we will leave things as they are. Master Dimsdale, you shall be responsible for making sure that the girl receives the right teaching, and that she goes to school when she is old enough to do so." The young priest now stood at the side of the group, his face half hidden by the heavy window curtain. Pearl, that wild and playful little thing, moved softly towards him, took his hand, and put it gently against her cheek. Her mother watched, surprised. "Is that my Pearl?" she thought, although she knew there was love in the child's heart. And Mr. Dimsdale looked round, put a hand on Pearl's head, hesitated for a moment, then kissed her forehead. Little Pearl laughed and half ran, half danced down the hall. "A strange child," said old Roger Chillingworth. "It is easy to see that she is her mother's daughter. But could a clever man guess, from the child's nature and from the way she behaves, the name of her father?" "It is better to pray for an answer to that question than to try to guess," said Mr. Wilson. "Better still to leave it a mystery, so that every good and godly man can show a father's kindness towards the poor fatherless child." Hester Prynne and her daughter then left the house. As they went down the steps, a window was thrown open, and a head appeared. It was Governor Bellingham's sister, Mistress Hibbins, calling down to invite Hester to a party with the devil in the forest that night. Some people said that Mistress Hibbins was more than a little mad. Others said she was truly a friend of the devil. Mad, evil, a friend of the devil, or all three, no one knows. But a few years later, she was judged to be a witch and was killed on the scaffold. "No, thank you," Hester called back to her, with a smile. "If they ever took Pearl away from me, I would go with you and sign my name in the devil's book. even in blood. But little Pearl is still with me, and so I must stay at home and keep watch over her.